The morning sun had barely stretched across the skyline when I left the house once again with no direction, just a haunting sense of urgency pulling me forward. For the past 2 months, I had been walking the same streets, standing in the same job lines, reading the same experience required signs that seemed to mock my every attempt. No matter how many offices I walked into or how many resumes I submitted, I always walked out with the same polite refusal. What made it worse was knowing I wasn't alone. The city was overflowing with people like me, jobless, invisible, and slowly crumbling under the weight of unmet responsibilities. Some of them had been searching for work not just for months, but for years, their eyes hollowed by constant rejection and the fading spark of hope. Every evening when I returned home, my heart ached, not from the physical exhaustion, but from the way my mother looked at me, with silent hope that maybe today would be the day her son brought good news. But I never did. Her eyes always dropped a little after meeting mine, her hopeful smile melting into quiet acceptance. Still, she would say the same thing every night. "Don't worry. Everything will be fine." But I knew she was lying, and I hated myself for making her lie. I was no longer just disappointed. I was ashamed. That day, I sat on the edge of a busy sidewalk for hours, watching cars pass, listening to the city's heartbeat and drowning in my own thoughts. A deep, painful voice inside me whispered a thought I had tried so hard to ignore. End it. I stared at the traffic with vacant eyes, imagining what it would feel like to be free from this struggle. No more expectations, no more failures, no more hunger or guilt. My thoughts spiraled until the pain became unbearable. I stood up in a daze, walked through the crowd like a ghost, and stepped directly into the road. I didn't even hear the screech of tires or the gasps from nearby strangers. All I felt was a tremendous impact, like my body had been struck by lightning and lifted into the air. The world spun. Everything went black. I don't remember the fall. I don't remember hitting the ground. The next thing I knew, I was waking up in a hospital bed, surrounded by the sterile scent of antiseptic and the dull hum of machines. My head throbbed, my limbs ached, and every breath burned my chest. I blinked slowly, trying to remember what had happened, until my gaze settled on a woman sitting by my bedside. She was older, poised, and dressed in elegant clothes that immediately suggested wealth. She leaned forward the moment she noticed my eyes open. "You're awake," she said gently. Thank God. How are you feeling?" I tried to speak, but my throat was dry and my voice came out cracked and weak. "Who are you?" I whispered. She smiled gently, the kind of smile that offered warmth yet carried a trace of worry. "I was in the car," she said. You came out of nowhere. My driver couldn't brake in time. We hit you hard. It was terrifying." I blinked again, trying to process what she was saying. A sudden flash of memory, the sound of screeching tires, a blur of black, the feeling of weightlessness crashed into my mind. My heart began to race. "We rushed you here," she continued, her voice soft but steady. "You've been unconscious for nearly 10 hours. The doctors weren't sure when you'd wake up. I've been here since... waiting." Her words washed over me like a tide. I didn't know what to feel. Shame, anger, gratitude. I wasn't even supposed to be alive. I tried to lift my hand to wipe my eyes, but a dull pain shot through my arm. Bandages were wrapped tightly around both wrists. My legs were covered too. The room smelled like medicine and regret. "You're safe now," she added. That's all that matters." I swallowed, my voice still hoarse. "You shouldn't have brought me here." She blinked, surprised. "What do you mean?" "I wanted to die," I muttered. "I wasn't trying to cross the road. I threw myself in front of your car on purpose." Her breath caught audibly. For a few moments, the room was quiet except for the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor beside me. Then she stood up, pacing slowly by the window, her arms folded across her chest. "You look barely 25, she said eventually, turning back to me. "What could possibly make someone your age wish for death?" I didn't answer right away. My chest felt tight, my shame growing heavier by the second. But something in her expression, a mixture of concern and disbelief, made me want to speak. I haven't been able to find work in months, I said quietly. I'm educated, willing, desperate. But no one wants to hire someone without experience. My family is barely surviving. My mother, she looks at me every day like I'm her last hope. And every day, I disappoint her. I can't do it anymore. I didn't see another way. She came closer again, sitting back on the chair beside my bed. Her eyes had softened and her voice lowered. I had no idea you were carrying so much pain, she said. I'm sorry you've had to face this alone. We sat there in silence, two strangers bound by an accident and a broken moment in time. Then she said something I didn't expect. If work is what you need, I can help with that. My eyes widened, disbelieving. What? I own a few businesses, factories, a trading company, a few properties. I'm always looking for reliable people. If you're truly willing to work, I'll find a place for you. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel hollow. I felt stunned. Her offer hung in the air like an unexpected gust of wind, gentle yet strong enough to knock me off balance. I stared at her, unsure if I had heard her correctly. You're offering me a job? I asked cautiously, still in disbelief. She nodded. Yes, I don't make offers lightly, but you seem sincere. And sometimes when fate puts two people in each other's path, there's a reason for it. I wanted to respond, to thank her, but my throat closed with emotion. My mind raced. A part of me was still suspicious. Why would someone like her go out of her way to help a complete stranger, especially someone who had nearly caused her serious trouble? As if reading my thoughts, she added, I don't want you to feel like you owe me anything. This isn't charity. I've been through enough in life to know how devastating despair can be. If I can help someone stand again, I will. That simple statement shattered whatever hesitation remained inside me. Thank you, I whispered. I don't know how to repay you. You don't need to, she replied. But if you're serious about this, we'll start as soon as you're well enough to walk. For now, focus on healing. Before she left, she handed me a small card, her name embossed in gold along with an address and a phone number. She pressed it gently into my palm, smiled once more, and walked out. Later that afternoon, my family arrived. The hospital staff had contacted them, using the information the woman had gathered when I regained consciousness. The moment my mother entered the room, she rushed to my bedside, eyes brimming with tears. What happened? She cried, holding my hand tightly. Why would you do this to yourself? I couldn't meet her eyes. I had no words to explain the hopelessness that had driven me to that moment. I only managed to shake my head. The woman, now standing discreetly in the corner, stepped forward and addressed my mother. It was an accident, nothing more. He's lucky and he'll be fine. My mother, unaware of the truth, thanked her repeatedly. I remained silent, grateful that the woman hadn't revealed what I had confessed earlier. Not everyone could understand what drove a man to the edge. Before leaving, she paid my hospital bill in full. When I tried to protest, she placed a few crisp notes into my hand and said softly, "Consider it an advance on your first paycheck and don't argue. You'll pay me back with work." I watched her walk away, her poise and calm unlike anyone I had ever met. There was a kindness in her that felt almost unreal. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I kept turning the card over in my hand. For the first time in a long while, I was thinking about the future, not the end, and for reasons I couldn't explain, the thought of seeing her again made my heart beat just a little faster. A few days later, after my body had regained enough strength to move around without wincing at every step, I left the hospital and returned home. The atmosphere in the house had changed. My mother was calmer, and my sisters, though still worried, had started smiling again. There was an air of cautious optimism that hadn't existed for weeks. I knew the reason. It wasn't because I had healed physically. It was because of that card still tucked safely in my wallet, the promise of a job, of stability, of dignity. 3 days after returning home, I stood outside the address printed on the card. It was an imposing glass front building with tall gates and a marble sign that read, Zahara International Trading Group. I stared at it, stunned. I had expected a small office tucked into a busy marketplace, maybe a warehouse or a basic workspace. But this was another world. The receptionist greeted me the moment I gave my name. "Ah, sir, you're finally here. Madame has been expecting you. She gave us very specific instructions to bring you in immediately when you arrived." I felt a strange weight settle in my chest. Why would someone like her go out of their way for someone like me? But I didn't question it aloud. Instead, I followed the assistant through a sleek hallway, past framed photographs, awards, and company milestones displayed like art, and then she was there. She stood at the far end of her office, dressed in a tailored cream suit, her hair tied back neatly. When she saw me, her face lit up with the kind of smile that didn't seem forced or formal. It was warm, almost personal. "I'm glad you came," she said. "I was starting to wonder if you'd changed your mind." "No," I replied quickly. I promised I'd come as soon as I recovered." She nodded and gestured toward the seat across from her. "Good, let's get started then." I sat, nervously straightening my shirt. I didn't know what kind of job she was about to offer or what she expected of me, but I was ready for anything. "You'll be working as my personal assistant," she said, her tone calm and matter-of-fact. "You'll accompany me to meetings, manage schedules, handle communication, and make sure my calendar runs smoothly. In return, I'll pay you 100,000 rupees per month. If you perform well, I'll provide accommodation, transport, whatever you need to work comfortably." I blinked. It was more than generous, it was unreal. "But I have no experience," I said hesitantly. She leaned back slightly, folding her hands in her lap. "Experience isn't always what matters. Sometimes loyalty, presence, and resilience matter more. You've already shown those." I didn't know what to say. Gratitude? Awe? Disbelief? I only managed a whisper. "Thank you." And just like that, I was no longer the man sitting on a footpath waiting to die. I had become someone with purpose, with potential, with a future. My first few weeks at Zahara International felt like a dream I didn't dare wake up from. Each morning, I walked into the gleaming building in crisp, ironed clothes. I was treated with respect by staff who didn't know my past or poverty. I had an ID badge, a desk, and most importantly, a sense of belonging. But my job wasn't like others. I didn't sit behind a screen or push papers. I was always at her side, attending meetings, reviewing documents she didn't have time for, reminding her of calls, making coffee runs, and keeping her world running smoothly. It wasn't difficult, just constant. She didn't tolerate mistakes, but she wasn't cruel either. She was composed, precise, and sometimes surprisingly kind. Every day, I learned something new about her: her taste in art, her obsession with punctuality, her dislike for flowers in the office, her preference for Turkish coffee over espresso. And she learned about me too, little by little. She asked about my sisters, about my childhood, about how I handled pressure. I told her bits and pieces, careful not to reveal too much. But each time she listened, truly listened, with the kind of attention most people reserved for someone important. My salary arrived like clockwork. 100,000 rupees, neatly deposited into my account, no delays, no deductions. It was more than I had ever imagined making. I paid off debts, filled the pantry at home, bought my sisters new clothes, and even began saving. My mother cried the day I gave her an envelope thick with cash. Her eyes shimmered with pride and disbelief. But as the weeks passed, something else started growing inside me. It wasn't gratitude anymore. It was hunger. The kind of hunger that sneaks in slowly, disguised as ambition. I began to imagine more, not just security or stability, but luxury. I pictured my mother in a bungalow with a garden. I saw my sisters getting married in elegant gowns. I imagined handing my brother-in-law the keys to a shiny new car as part of their wedding gift, and then I imagined myself at the top. I began watching her differently. Not as an employer, not even as a woman, but as a symbol of everything I had ever wanted: wealth, power, command. She was older, yes, but attractive in her own right, elegant, alone. I had never heard her speak of family, no husband, no children, no one. I started to wonder, what if I was more than just her assistant? What if I became her partner, her husband? And once that thought crept in, it refused to leave. I tried to shake it off, reminding myself she was my boss, that such ideas were inappropriate and ungrateful. But the truth was, the fantasy only grew stronger with each passing day. And the worst part, it didn't feel impossible. The day her new car arrived, a sleek, imported masterpiece polished to a mirror shine, I stood in the parking lot running my fingers along the smooth hood, admiring it like a child would admire a toy too expensive to touch. She saw me and laughed softly. "You like it?" she asked. "It's not just the car," I said without thinking. "It's everything." Her expression changed subtly. Amusement softened into curiosity. "What do you mean by that?" she asked, stepping closer. I hesitated. The words were already on the tip of my tongue, reckless and dangerous, but I had rehearsed them in my head 100 times. This was my moment, the all-or-nothing risk that could end everything or change my life forever. "I mean," I said carefully, "you." She raised an eyebrow. "Me?" I nodded, heart pounding. "You're smart, powerful, kind. You've helped me more than I deserve, and yet I see you here every day, alone. I can't help but wonder, don't you ever feel like something's missing?" There was a long pause. She folded her arms, tilting her head slightly. "And what do you think is missing?" I held her gaze. "Someone by your side. Not professionally, personally." A silence fell over us like a blanket. I braced myself for her to laugh at me, to scold me, or worse, fire me. But instead, she walked over to the car, leaned back against it, and looked away for a moment. Then she spoke. "You're not the first man to suggest something like this," she said. "Most of them saw my money, not me. They saw an opportunity, not a relationship." "And what do you see in me?" I asked. She turned and looked directly into my eyes. "That's what I'm trying to figure out." The next day, she invited me to dinner at an upscale restaurant, just the two of us. It wasn't a formal proposal, but something had shifted between us. The conversation was less professional, more personal. She asked about my dreams, my fears, my family. I answered every question honestly, playing the role of a man who had rediscovered purpose, who admired her for who she was, not what she owned. A week later, she made her decision. "If we do this," she said one evening in her office, "no one can know. Not the staff, not the media, not your family. I don't want rumors. I don't want people accusing you of marrying me for wealth or me of exploiting someone younger." "I understand," I replied. "Discretion is fine by me." And just like that, we were married, quietly, privately, without celebration or ceremony. There were no photos, no announcements, no witnesses except the official and her housemaid, but that night, as I stood in her mansion, my new home, I couldn't help but feel I had won something far greater than any job could offer. I had outplayed the game, or so I thought. That evening, the mansion was lit softly with warm lights and perfumed with jasmine. Dinner had been served in gold-rimmed plates. She was glowing, dressed in a silk gown, her hair loose, her demeanor relaxed but intense, as if she had been waiting for this night far longer than I had imagined. After dinner, she guided me upstairs to a grand bedroom decorated with rose petals and scented candles. Her hand slipped into mine with unexpected gentleness. She handed me a black velvet box. Inside was an expensive suit. "Go change," she said softly. "Tonight is ours." I went into the changing room, my heart thudding, part excitement, part unease. Something about the night felt surreal. I had come so far from who I once was, unemployed, hopeless, and invisible. Now I was here in an opulent room, about to share a bed with a woman who owned empires. It felt like fiction. Until it didn't. When I returned to the bedroom, the lights had dimmed. She stood near the bed, her expression unreadable. She motioned me forward and, without a word, reached out and clasped my hands. But just as I stepped closer, something changed. Her grip tightened, too firm, almost unnatural. Her smile faded, her eyes darkened. Then, in a flash, pain shot through my side. I screamed, stumbling backward only to see her standing there holding a small knife. The blade glistened with my blood. What, what are you doing? I cried, clutching my side in disbelief. She advanced slowly, her eyes wild, breathing heavy. Don't act surprised. You thought you could use me, just like the rest of them. I didn't, I started, but she cut me off with a laugh that chilled me to my core. I've seen your kind. My first husband, he married me for money, and when he got it, he hit me, humiliated me, made me feel worthless. So I made sure he never did it again. I stumbled back toward the nightstand, struggling to find a lamp or something to defend myself with. I've married 6 men, she continued, almost proudly now. 6, and do you know what they all had in common? They thought I was weak. They thought they could control me, use me, replace me. My hands found the lamp. I yanked it, smashing it against the wall to turn on the light. The room was bathed in warm yellow, and her face, once elegant and calm, now looked terrifying. Her hair was disheveled, eyes wide with a manic gleam. You were different at first, she whispered, but then I saw it in your eyes, that same greed. She lunged at me again. I grabbed a chair and pushed her back, adrenaline taking over. She fell, striking her head on the edge of the side table. Blood trickled down her temple. She didn't move. Terrified and shaking, I ran from the room, out of the house, and into my car, ignoring the pain searing through my side. I didn't stop until I reached the hospital. I didn't know if she was dead or alive. I only knew that I had just survived a wedding night with a woman I barely understood. One who had just tried to kill me. I woke up in a hospital room, the sterile scent of antiseptic pulling me out of a haze of pain and panic. My body throbbed. My bandaged side burned. I blinked slowly and turned my head. My mother was there. She was standing at my bedside, her face pale and hollowed with fear, her eyes swollen from crying. She wrapped her arms around me tightly the moment I stirred, whispering prayers between sobs. What happened to you? You were supposed to be with your wife. They called from the hospital. You were bleeding. What's going on? I didn't know how to answer her. My mind replayed the night in fragments. Her smile, the knife, the madness in her voice, the blood. It felt like a nightmare, but the pain was all too real. I took a long breath, and for the first time, I told her everything. From the marriage to the attack. Her face paled with every sentence. She's not just unstable, I said, my voice trembling. She's dangerous. She's done this before, to others. My mother was speechless. Her eyes were wide with horror. I think she's killed men before me, I added, the words tasting like rust. I need to go to the police. And I did. The officers listened, their expressions growing more rigid as I spoke. They took my statement, photographed my wounds, and assured me they would investigate immediately. Later that evening, the police raided her mansion. They found her, alive, sitting calmly in the same blood-stained bedroom, sipping tea as if nothing had happened. But the true horror had yet to be discovered. Behind the mansion was a private garden, beautiful, overgrown, and walled off. At first glance, it looked serene. But when authorities began digging at seemingly disturbed earth patches, what they uncovered froze the air. Bodies, 6 to be exact, all male, all buried in separate unmarked graves. Her previous husbands vanished without a trace, just as she had hinted. The pieces clicked together horrifyingly well. She had married them quietly, isolated them from the world, and once convinced they were after her wealth, she killed them, one by one, clean, silent. Erased. Her gardener, a middle-aged man with a dull expression and trembling hands, admitted to helping her bury the bodies. She paid me. A lot, and she threatened me. I was scared, he confessed. She denied everything at first, claimed she was being framed, manipulated. But when the police showed her the unearthed remains, something inside her snapped. Her screams filled the interrogation room. And then, she confessed. The first husband had been cruel, physically abusive, and greedy. When she killed him in self-defense, something inside her fractured permanently. Every man afterward became a reflection of him. Every one of them in her mind was a liar, a thief, a predator. And I was supposed to be the 7th. The news spread like wildfire. Billionaire, widow, serial killer arrested. Every newspaper, every TV anchor, every social media post exploded with her story. Reporters camped outside the police station. Psychologists gave their theories. Survivors of abuse drew parallels. People were horrified and captivated. But for me, it was personal. I wasn't just the man who had escaped. I was the man who had once desired everything she had. They called her dangerous, they labeled her insane. But what haunted me most wasn't what she had done to others, but it was why she had done it. She was remanded to court within days. I was called as the key witness. Standing in that courtroom, I saw her again, this time in prison attire, handcuffed, her hair pulled back, her face pale but oddly peaceful. There was no rage in her eyes now, no madness, just quiet stillness. The judge read the charges: multiple counts of murder, attempted homicide, conspiracy to cover up corpses, obstruction of justice. Her lawyer claimed mental illness. Psychiatrists confirmed it. She was ruled criminally insane. She wouldn't go to prison. She would go to a psychiatric institution for life. But the verdict brought me no closure. After the trial, I stood outside the courthouse with my mother. She held my hand, her grip warm and firm. She looked into my eyes and said, "You were spared. God gave you a second chance. Don't waste it on hate or guilt." But that's all I could feel, guilt, because I had married her for money, because I had ignored every warning, because somewhere deep down I knew I wasn't innocent either. The manager who had once warned me met me days later. He confessed he'd suspected her long ago but had no proof. He had seen assistants vanish without a trace. She would always claim they had moved on or found new work. He never pushed back. "She was powerful. I was scared," he said quietly. And I understood that fear now, more than ever. But the guilt wouldn't leave. I hadn't married a monster out of love. I had done it out of greed. And that same greed had nearly cost me my life. And my future. Because her final strike, the blade she had used, had cut deep. Not just into my flesh, but into my future as a man. The doctors confirmed I would never father a child again. The wound was permanent, irreversible. It shattered me. Not because I was desperate for children, but because it was a price I had paid blindly. And yet, I couldn't hate her. What she had endured in her past, the trauma, the betrayal, it had twisted her, poisoned her heart. But I couldn't shake the image of her trembling in that courtroom, broken, fragile, silent. She had once been a victim, before she became a villain. And now she was just gone. Months passed. The court's verdict faded from headlines. Her mansion remained sealed. The garden where 6 graves had rested was now under government investigation. The media shifted its attention to the next scandal, the next horror. But my life didn't return to normal, because it never was. I wasn't the man I had been before I met her, and I wasn't the same man who had once stood on a pavement, begging for a job or a way out. Pain has a strange way of remaking you. My recovery was slow. Physically, the wounds began to heal. But emotionally, I carried scars no doctor could bandage. Sometimes I would wake in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, her voice echoing in my head, accusing, sobbing, laughing. Sometimes I would imagine her standing at the foot of my bed, that same calm fury in her eyes. I knew it wasn't real, but the fear was. And yet, I couldn't bring myself to hate her. She had ruined me in ways I couldn't begin to explain. She had taken from me the ability to dream of a family, of a simple, happy life with children. And still, I visited her. Yes, I visited her. The first time I walked into the psychiatric hospital, I felt nauseous. My hands trembled, but I needed to see her. Not for revenge, not even for closure. I needed to see if she was still the same woman, or if the monster had faded with the madness. She didn't recognize me at first. Her eyes were distant, lost in another time. She sat by the window, humming a tune I didn't recognize. When I said her name, she looked up, blankly, slowly, and then a flicker of something returned to her gaze. "You came back," she whispered. I nodded. I needed to. She looked down at her hands. "I don't remember everything, but I remember you. And the garden." Tears welled in her eyes. For a moment, I saw a glimpse of someone else. Someone before the trauma, before the rage. A young girl who once loved, who once hoped. "I'm sorry," she said. "For everything." And strangely, I believed her. Not because it undid what she did, but because some part of her, no matter how small, still wanted to heal. I continued visiting her every month. Some days she'd speak with clarity, other days she'd retreat into silence or screams. But I stayed. I listened. I offered her the one thing no one else ever had: forgiveness. Because I had entered her life with greed, and she had shown me the price of using people as ladders. I never remarried. I never tried to. I couldn't give a woman children, but more than that, I couldn't give anyone the parts of me I had buried in that mansion. Instead, I poured my time into helping others like me, men and women trapped by desperation, drawn by false promises. I started a small charity with the money I had saved. It wasn't much, but it was honest, because sometimes survival isn't about escaping death. It's about becoming someone who no longer needs to.